Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sincerely Latinas podcast. Once again, I am your host, Melly, and it's been an interesting week. I hope you guys all had a really good week or a really good weekend. I hope work has been good. I hope you guys are enjoying your spring, doing a lot of spring cleaning and getting ready for the summer. I know for me, this week has been a lot of changes, basically. But for starters, I did do a lot of spring cleaning, and I basically just redecorated my room. I changed everything, and I've been a bit busy, so I haven't really had much time to work on the podcast like I really want to, but it's all good. I'm working on it right now. I have more time now, so I can finally like breathe and do what I can work on for the podcast. And if you guys hear some background noises, please don't listen to that. Please avoid that. I do have my family like in the living rooms or in the kitchens, but yeah. So I wanted to talk about a little reel or a post that I had posted just last week, and it kind of went viral, so I'm really happy about that. It's like my first big hit, and I love it. I'm so happy. In a lot of my reels or a lot of my posts, I'm usually like in my car and I just add in like some relatable captions or like short stories. And in this one, I added being first gen Latinas were often viewed as not feeling Latina enough. So because we're viewed as not Latina enough, we feel like we have to prove that we are Latinas and that we have to stick to traditional behaviors or traditional ways, even if that means that we don't like that, like we don't want to, and that's just not who we are. We have to do it so that way we can prove to, I don't know, like our families or our friends or to our culture that we are in fact Latina. And that kind of went viral, so I'm really happy about that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Basically, I wanted to talk about why we are viewed as not Latina enough, and why we always constantly feel like we have to prove to others that we are in fact Mexican, or that we do know the culture, or that we are Latinas, or that they can't tell us otherwise. And yeah, I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about that today. So I have my notes here, and what I've noticed is that I like to write down like little notes here and there. I feel like that helps me a lot when I'm recording an episode. So it just helps to keep me organized. So I'm just like not all over the place talking about one thing and talking about another thing. So, feeling Latina enough. Am I Latina enough? And honestly, I am, and we are, and yeah, you are. If you catch yourself asking like, oh, I'm not Mexican enough, or I'm not like wherever you're from, like Puerto Rican enough, or Colombia enough, or just in general Latina enough, I'm not Spanish enough, you are just as much Latina as anybody else. I grew up feeling like I was not Mexican enough because my family's from Mexico. My family grew up in Mexico. My parents, they grew up in Mexico. They were born in Mexico, and I am the first to be born here in the US, California specifically. And so, yeah, growing up as a first gen Latina in California or in the US, I grew up with both Spanish and I grew up with English. And the way that I view it is that I had to kind of like balance the two. I had to balance Spanish and I had to balance English. Like, okay, I speak Spanish at home with my family and I speak English outside of the house. So I had to keep like a good balance between the two. But I just felt like I never like, I felt like I never could improve my Spanish. I felt like my Spanish wasn't like, I felt like because I'm in the US, because I go to school and because I go to work and everybody speaks English, that's like the primary language here. I feel like that kind of overshadowed the Spanish at home because I would just spend so much more time outside of home and surrounded by people who know more English rather than Spanish. And of course, like I learned how to read in English, and I learned how to write in English, and my grammar in English. But I never learned all of that in Spanish. The only Spanish that I knew was the Spanish that I would hear at home. I never learned how to read in Spanish or how to write in Spanish. I never really properly learned my grammar in Spanish. And I felt like that affected me a lot growing up. I do consider myself like bilingual, but I do know Spanish. I can understand it. I can keep up like a basic conversation, and I can understand some slang languages or like some words. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I know like the basics of Spanish, but I don't think I know fluently or like the best level of Spanish, if that makes sense. I'm like Spanish level number 5, and I need to get to level 10, if that makes sense. So growing up that way, English kind of overshadowed Spanish at my Spanish speaking basically. And because of that, my Spanish started to slowly fade away. I just one day forgot Spanish. I don't know what happened. I just forgot it. And I would put myself down a lot, of course, because that's just how I am. I tend to put myself down a lot. And I did put myself down for not understanding the Spanish that I should understand, because I'm Latina, I'm Mexican, and I should know Spanish. And if I don't know Spanish, then I'm not Latina enough. So that really made me feel like an outcast. That really made me feel kind of like I didn't belong in the Latino community or the Mexican community, and I'm just like whitewashed. And I've been told that before. Like I've been told like I'm so white, I'm so whitewashed. But then if I were to go to Mexico, I'm whitewashed, right? Like I'm a gringa. But if I'm here like in the US, some people will see me as way too Mexican. So it's like There's no in between. I heard this saying by Becky G, and she said, I'm not 50-50, I'm 100%. And I always consider myself like Mexican American. And when you say Mexican American, at least for me, I would automatically think, okay, 50-50. I'm 50 Mexicana and I'm 50 American. But when you really think about it, that's basically kind of like, then again, kind of like separating, at least me, separating me from like feeling fully Mexican, or like from feeling fully American. And once again, it's like feeling like I have to balance out the two, and I have to choose, am I really Mexican, or am I really American? I'm not 50-50. I am 100% Mexican American, and I'm proud of that. And although my Spanish may not be the best, and although I may not have a lot of knowledge of the Mexican culture, I am 100% Mexican, and I am 100% American. I grew up here. I know California. I know my hometown, and my bloodline is Mexicana, and my parents are from Mexico, and I know the Mexican food. I know the Spanish music and little things like that. Although I may not know all of Mexico and everything that there is to know about the history of Mexico or the culture, that doesn't make me any less Latina. I am just as Latina as someone who were to be born in Mexico and raised in Mexico, and just they lived their whole life in Mexico. I'm just Latina. I'm just as Latina as they are, and so are you. Because I felt like I wasn't Latina enough, because I didn't know the best Spanish, or because I didn't know much about Mexico, or because I didn't know how to cook, or I didn't know like simple Latina traditions. I felt like I really had to prove that hey, I'm Mexican. I felt like I really had to just put in a lot of effort, and to basically, I felt like I had to be something that I'm not. I felt like I had to prove my ways, and in order for me to prove my ways, I have to show it in a way that isn't authentically myself. I never liked that. And if I don't prove that I'm Latina enough, then I'm just a disappointment. I felt like I had to prove some sort of way that I am Mexicana, that I am Latina, that I have to know how to cook Mexican home cooked meals, that I have to know how to speak the perfect Spanish. My grammar has to be perfect. I have to read in Spanish, and I have to learn how to write in Spanish, and that I have to know so much about Mexico, about the culture, about the history, and I have to be super paisa, or I just have to stick to traditional Latina ways, or else if I don't, then I would just feel like a disappointment to my family, or to the culture, or to myself. And I just felt like, okay, if I'm not Latina enough, then I'm whitewashed. But I didn't like that because I knew I wasn't whitewashed, you know? So no, I just felt like a disappointment for not proving, for not wanting to prove, for feeling not Latina enough, for not feeling like I have to, for feeling like I have to stick to traditions, for feeling like I had to stick to traditions, even though those traditions don't align with me authentically, because in the end of the day, I would just be the disappointment. And some of the traditions that I really don't like that are kind of like shown to us at an early age is that we have to basically be codependent. There's no way that you have to that you can stay single, that you can do things your own way, that you can be sola, that you can be alone. Because in the Mexican culture, it's very common that the woman has to be with a man, so that way the man can provide for her, support her, or else she's not successful. That a woman can't even be successful on her own. The only way that she is successful if she becomes a mom or a wife, a mom and a wife. And I never liked that tradition, and I really want to break that because that's not me, and I know that's not a lot of us, right? We don't want to depend on a man to help us or support us. Like, we don't need that. This is the 21st century, and we're first gen Latinas. We can basically do whatever we want, okay? We can be with whoever we want, and we can live our lives the way that we want to live our lives authentically by being ourselves. We can let go of traditions. We can do things our way for ourselves. And we don't need to be a mom or a wife in order for us to feel successful, or in order for us to feel like, okay, I'm gonna be okay in life. I'm gonna be doing good because I have a husband, I have a man who's like providing for me, and all I gotta do now is just cook and clean for him and just be a mom. I hate that so much. I know for a fact that if I stay single for however long I want to stay single, and it takes me like years to have kids, then so be it. Because in the end of the day, I know who I am. And who I am is not the typical traditional Latina that's going to stay at home and just expect a man to provide for her, to support her, to do everything for her. No, no, no. I'm not going to ask him for permission if I can borrow money for groceries, or so I can like buy my own Starbucks. No. I'm gonna do my own thing. I have goals and ambitions. I have goals and I have dreams, and I want to do a lot of things besides being a mom and a wife. But don't get me wrong, like, you can definitely be a mom and a wife. That's great. Like, I love that. Taking care of a family, that's so much fun. Great. For some people, they want that. But for others, I feel like we are meant to be more than a mom and a wife. We're meant to do so much more than cooking and cleaning. It doesn't always have to be about his career. What about your career? You know? So that's just a tradition that I grew up with. And if I don't honor that tradition, if I don't go with that tradition, then I'm not a true traditional Latina. But you know what? Maybe I don't want to be a traditional Latina. Maybe I just want to be my own way of being Latina enough. Maybe I just want to be my own definition of Latina. And maybe for some people, for some people it looks different. For me, I'm being my authentically self, and to me, that's Latina enough. I am my own way of showing up as Latina. I am my own way of showing up as Mexicana. I have my own way of just showing up in general. And I'm really proud of that. And I don't feel ashamed of showing that to the world. You know what? If you feel like your Spanish is not the best, you're still Latina enough. You're still Mexican enough. You're still Colombian enough. Puerto Rican enough. Peruvian enough. You're Latina enough. If you don't know how to cook traditional meals, you're still a Latina. You have that bloodline. You have that heart of the Latina. You have that pride of the Mexicana or whichever culture you're from. I know I have that pride and love of a Mexicana. And I know I have that heart of Latina, and that's what really makes me feel Latina enough. I just really hope you guys own your own truth and you guys stick to just being your authentic self. Don't feel pressured to feel like you have to stick to traditions to feel Mexicana or to feel Latina or to be accepted by your family or to be accepted by your country or to not feel like a disappointment. I hope you stick to your truths and I hope you stay true to yourself, which is super important. Just by being yourself, that's being your own Latina. That's you just being your own type of Mexicana, your own type of Latina. That's just you being your own Latina enough. That's you being enough for yourself. That's you being enough for your culture, for your country, for your family, and so on. Just by being authentically you and sticking to your own ways. So I really hope you guys don't lessen yourselves. I hope you don't change yourselves. For those of you who know her, the most famous, iconic Mexicana that there is to ever live in the planet. However, she is no longer with us. The famous Selena. She did not grow up in Mexico. She was also like she was just like us. She grew up in Texas. She didn't know Spanish. I think there was this one video that I remember that I'll never forget. It was an interview and she said, they see cuarto. She said they see cuarto. But yet, she still became the most iconic Mexican icon that there is. Although she did not know Spanish that well. Look at her now. She, like everybody in Mexico loves her. And yes, may she rest in peace. But there is this quote by her that I would like to share with you guys before I end today's episode. Okay, so the famous quote by Selena Quintanilla is, "I feel very proud to be Mexican American." I didn't have the opportunity to learn Spanish when I was a girl, but it's never too late to get in touch with your roots. So that was a famous quote by her. And I hope you guys related to today's episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate all of you for tuning in and supporting this podcast. If you haven't already, please follow me on Instagram. Please follow me on TikTok, Sincerely Latina. And yeah, send me a message. Let me know what you think about this episode. Give me a review or yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful week and I will see you again on the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.